Billionaire's father ripped the black quiet maid's uniform. His reaction left the whole house speechless. The sound of tearing fabric echoed through the marble halls of the Thompson mansion, but it was Taylor's quiet dignity in that moment of humiliation that would shatter everything they thought they knew about power, family, and the true cost of cruelty. Before we get deep into the story, please let me know in the comment where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you're hooked in and ready to enjoy the story, because tomorrow, I have another beautiful story to share with you and I don't want you to miss it for anything. Now, let's begin today's story. The morning sun cast golden shadows across the pristine marble floors of the Thompson estate in Manhattan's Upper East Side, but Taylor Williams moved through them like a ghost, silent, efficient, invisible. At 28, she had perfected the art of being present without being seen, her movements choreographed by 3 years of navigating the labyrinthine halls of one of New York's most prominent families. She adjusted her black uniform, pressed to perfection despite its age, and checked her reflection in the ornate hallway mirror. The woman staring back had kind eyes that had seen too much, hands that worked without complaint, and a spine that stayed straight despite the weight she carried. Today felt different somehow, though she couldn't pinpoint why. What do you think makes someone truly powerful? Money, status, or something deeper? Share your thoughts below. 3 floors above, in a penthouse office overlooking Central Park, Thompson Mitchell stood at floor-to-ceiling windows, his reflection a study in controlled success. At 35, he had inherited not just billions, but the burden of a family name built on both achievement and expectation. His tailored suit hung perfectly on his tall frame, but his dark eyes held a weariness that wealth couldn't cure. "The Hartford Industries merger needs your signature," his assistant's voice filtered through the intercom, but Thompson's attention remained fixed on the park below, watching early morning joggers navigate paths he'd walked as a child, back when the world seemed simpler, before he understood the true cost of the Thompson legacy. Meanwhile, in the mansion's East Wing, Richard Thompson, 72 and unforgiving, sat in his leather chair like a king holding court over yesterday's glories. The elder Thompson had built his empire through steel and determination, but age had sharpened his edges into something crueler. His pale blue eyes, once keen with business acumen, now held the cold calculation of a man who measured worth in dollars and bloodlines. "Where's that girl with my coffee?" Richard's voice carried the impatience of someone unaccustomed to waiting, his weathered hands drumming against the mahogany desk that had witnessed decades of deals and decisions. Taylor heard the summons from 2 rooms away and quickened her pace, silver tray balanced perfectly in her hands. The morning routine was sacred in the Thompson house. Coffee at exactly 8:15 a.m., newspapers arranged in order of importance, and Richard's medication set out precisely as his doctor had prescribed. She had never been late, never made an error, never given him cause for complaint. But as she approached his study, Taylor's foot caught on the Persian rug's lifted corner, the same rug she'd warned the housekeeping manager about 3 times. The tray tilted, hot coffee splashing across Richard's imported Italian newspapers and antique desk surface. Time seemed to freeze. The golden liquid spread across financial reports and family photographs, and in that moment, Taylor knew that her invisible armor had just shattered. Richard's face transformed from morning irritation to something far more dangerous. He rose slowly, deliberately, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor like a blade being drawn. "You clumsy," the word that followed hit Taylor harder than any physical blow could have. It was a word that reduced her to nothing, that erased her years of faithful service, that cut straight to wounds she'd spent a lifetime trying to heal. But it was what happened next that would change everything. Richard's eyes blazed with a fury that seemed to consume the oxygen in the room. The coffee stain spread across his mahogany desk like spilled blood, darkening the leather-bound portfolio that contained his morning stock reports. But it wasn't the mess that ignited his rage. It was the audacity of imperfection in his perfectly ordered world. "Look what you've done." His voice thundered through the study, each word dripping with decades of accumulated prejudice and entitlement. 30 years I've been telling Thompson that hiring your kind is a mistake. Clumsy, careless. Taylor's hands trembled as she reached for the cloth napkin on her tray, her training kicking in despite the venom in his words. Sir, I'm so sorry. Let me clean. Don't you dare touch anything else. Richard's face had turned a dangerous shade of red, the veins in his temples pulsing with barely contained rage. He moved around the desk with surprising speed for his age, his expensive Italian shoes crunching over fragments of the shattered coffee cup. The morning light streaming through the tall windows seemed to spotlight the moment as Richard's weathered hand shot out and grabbed the collar of Taylor's black uniform. The fabric was worn but dignified. She had spent her own money to keep it pressed and mended, a symbol of her pride in honest work. This is what happens when standards slip, he snarled, his grip tightening on the delicate material. When people forget their place. Taylor's breath caught in her throat. She had endured 3 years of subtle dismissals, condescending glances, and being treated as furniture that occasionally moved. But this was different. This was personal. This was cruel in a way that cut deeper than any paycheck could heal. Please, Mr. Thompson, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the thundering of her own heartbeat. I'll replace everything. I'll work extra hours. Extra hours? Richard's laugh was harsh, bitter. You think this is about money? This is about respect. About knowing your place. His grip shifted, and Taylor heard the first small tear, a sound like a whisper of fabric giving way under pressure. Her eyes widened, not with fear, but with a dawning realization of just how far he was willing to go to prove his point. Sir, please. The tear became a rip. Then another. The sound echoed through the marble hallway beyond the open door, where other staff members had frozen in their morning routines. Maria, the head housekeeper, stood motionless in the doorway, her cleaning supplies forgotten. James, the elderly butler who had served the family for 2 decades, appeared behind her, his face pale with shock. But it was the sound of footsteps on the marble stairs, quick, determined, expensive shoes taking them 2 at a time, that cut through the tension like a blade. Thompson had heard his father's voice from his office 3 floors up. He had heard that particular tone before, had witnessed its devastating effects on business partners, employees, family members. But as he reached the study doorway, what he saw made his blood freeze in his veins. His father, red-faced and trembling with rage, held Taylor's uniform in his gnarled fists. The fabric had torn from collar to waist, exposing her simple white undershirt and the vulnerability she had spent years hiding behind professional competence. But it wasn't the physical exposure that hit Thompson like a physical blow, it was the look in Taylor's eyes. She wasn't cowering. She wasn't begging. She stood perfectly still, her chin raised slightly, her dark eyes reflecting a dignity that couldn't be torn away like fabric. In that moment, she looked like royalty being dragged to execution, unbroken, unashamed, unbowed. What the hell is going on here? Thompson's voice cut through the silence like a whip crack. Richard spun around, his grip still tight on Taylor's ruined uniform. This girl, this clumsy girl, destroyed important documents. She needs to learn. Let her go. The words came out quietly, but they carried the weight of 35 years of watching his father's cruelty from the sidelines. Thompson stepped into the room, his presence immediately shifting the balance of power. He was taller than his father now, broader, younger, stronger, and for the first time in his life, he was unafraid to use those advantages. Thompson, this doesn't concern. It concerns me. His son's voice was steel wrapped in silk. Let her go. Now. The silence stretched between them, father and son, past and future, cruelty and conscience. The household staff held their breath. Taylor remained perfectly still, though her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. Richard's grip loosened. The torn fabric fell from his fingers like discarded evidence of his shame. But what happened next? Thompson's reaction to seeing Taylor standing there, dignity intact despite the destruction of her uniform, would echo through the halls of the Thompson mansion for years to come. Because in that moment, as their eyes met across the wreckage of spilled coffee and torn fabric, something shifted. Something that had nothing to do with employer and employee, nothing to do with social class or family expectations. Something that would change everything. What would you do if you witnessed such an act of cruelty? Would you have the courage to step in, or would you look the other way? Let us know in the comments. The silence in the Thompson mansion felt different now, heavier, more deliberate. It had been 2 days since Richard had torn Taylor's uniform, 2 days since Thompson had stood up to his father in a way that sent shockwaves through their carefully constructed world. The staff moved through the halls like they were walking on eggshells, whispering in corners about what they'd witnessed. Taylor sat in her small room in the staff quarters, staring at the torn uniform she'd folded neatly on her dresser. Thompson had offered to replace it immediately, had even suggested she take time off with full pay, but she'd refused both. Something stubborn in her core wouldn't let her accept what felt like charity, even from someone who'd shown her kindness. Pride, she whispered to herself, touching the jagged tear in the fabric. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. Baby girl, pride can be your armor or your prison. Make sure you know which one you're wearing. 3 floors above, Thompson paced his office like a caged animal. He tried calling Taylor to his office twice, but she'd sent word through Mrs. Henderson that she was managing her duties just fine, thank you. Her polite refusal felt like a wall he couldn't climb, and it frustrated him more than any business deal gone wrong. The worst part was his father's reaction, or lack thereof. Richard had retreated to his wing of the house, acting as if nothing had happened. He took his meals in his room, conducted his few remaining business calls from his private line, and when Thompson had tried to confront him again, Richard had simply said, "You've made your position clear, son. Now live with it." "Sir." Mrs. Henderson appeared in Thompson's doorway, her usually composed face showing traces of worry. "Your father is asking for his afternoon tea. He specifically requested that Taylor bring it." Thompson's jaw tightened. "Absolutely not. That's what I told him, but he said if she doesn't bring it, he won't eat today. You know how his blood sugar gets." Mrs. Henderson wrung her hands. "I don't want to put Taylor in that position, but I'm worried about Mr. Richard's health." It was manipulation, pure and simple. Richard was using his age and medical condition as weapons, forcing Thompson into an impossible choice. Let his father potentially harm himself through stubbornness, or send Taylor back into the lion's den. Down in the kitchen, Taylor was arranging flowers in a vase, white roses from the garden that she tended during her few free hours. Her movements were precise, methodical, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept replaying Thompson's words, "You are not nothing." For simple words that had shaken something loose inside her that she'd thought was buried forever. She'd spent 3 years in this house being invisible, and in one moment, someone had truly seen her. It terrified her as much as it moved her. "Taylor." Thompson's voice made her look up. He stood in the kitchen doorway, his expensive suit somehow making him look more vulnerable than powerful. "We need to talk." "I'm working, Mr. Thompson." "Please." The single word carried weight. "Just 5 minutes." She set down the flowers and followed him to the small breakfast nook off the kitchen, a space she'd cleaned hundreds of times but never sat in. When she perched on the edge of a chair, he sat across from her, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "He's asking for you," Thompson said quietly, "specifically requesting that you bring his tea." Taylor's hands clenched in her lap. "I see. I won't let you go up there. I won't put you through that again." That's not your choice to make. The words came out sharper than she intended. With respect, Mr. Thompson, I've been taking care of myself long before you decided to be my protector. Is that what you think this is about? Me playing hero? Taylor met his gaze steadily. Isn't it? Rich man saves poor girl from mean father? Makes you feel good about yourself. The accusation hit its mark. Thompson leaned back as if she'd slapped him. You think I did it for me? I think you did it because it was easy. Taylor's voice remained calm, but her words cut deep. Standing up to your father when you're already established, already powerful, that doesn't cost you anything. But it costs me everything. What do you mean? You think other employers won't hear about this? You think word won't get around that I'm the maid who caused trouble in the Thompson house? I needed this job, Mr. Thompson. I needed to be invisible. Now I'm a story people will tell. Thompson felt something crack inside his chest. He'd thought he was doing the right thing, but he hadn't considered the consequences for her. His privilege had blinded him to the reality of her situation. I didn't think. No, you didn't. Taylor stood, smoothing her skirt. So when your father asks for his tea, I'll bring it. Because that's my job, and I need this job, and sometimes survival matters more than dignity. She walked toward the door, then stopped without turning around. But Mr. Thompson? What you did, what you said. I won't forget that either. Even if it complicated everything. After she left, Thompson sat alone in the breakfast nook, understanding for the first time that good intentions without wisdom could be their own form of cruelty. Outside the window, storm clouds gathered over Central Park, and he wondered if the real battle was just beginning. In her room, Taylor stood before her mirror again, but this time she wasn't checking her appearance. She was looking for something she'd lost long ago, the woman she used to be before life taught her to disappear. Thompson's words had awakened something dangerous, hope. And hope, she knew, was the most terrifying thing of all. The torn uniform lay between them like a bridge neither knew how to cross. The service elevator had been broken for 3 days, and Taylor found herself trapped in the mansion's east wing with nowhere to retreat. The main corridors buzzed with staff preparing for Mrs. Thompson's charity gala that evening, but the east wing remained eerily quiet, just her and the lingering tension from the morning's events. She had changed into her spare uniform, but the memory of torn fabric still clung to her skin like shame. Every step felt calculated now, every movement measured against the possibility of another encounter with Richard. The confidence she'd shown earlier felt like borrowed armor that had already been returned to its rightful owner. Thompson found her in the library, methodically dusting shelves she'd already cleaned twice. She didn't hear him approach. His expensive Italian shoes moved silently across the thick carpet, but she felt his presence like a shift in the room's temperature. Taylor. His voice was gentle, nothing like his father's commanding bark. She turned slowly, her hand still clutching the dust cloth like a shield. Mr. Thompson. I'm sorry, I didn't know you'd need the library. I can stay. The word came out more urgent than he'd intended, and he saw her eyes widen slightly. Please. I came looking for you. The admission hung between them, strange and unexpected. In 3 years of working in this house, Thompson had rarely spoken to her beyond polite pleasantries. Now he stood before her in his shirt sleeves, his usually perfect appearance slightly disheveled, his dark eyes holding something that looked like regret. I wanted to apologize, he said, moving closer but keeping careful distance. For what happened this morning. For what my father did to you. Taylor's fingers tightened on the cloth. You don't need to apologize for him, Mr. Thompson. It's not your fault. Isn't it? The question came out sharper than he'd intended. I've watched him treat the staff like they're invisible for years. I've said nothing. That makes me complicit." She studied his face, searching for the catch, the angle, the reason behind this sudden concern. Wealthy men didn't corner their maids in libraries to offer apologies unless they wanted something in return. She'd learned that lesson long ago. "What do you want from me?" The question was direct, unadorned by the usual deference she showed the family. Thompson was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. Outside, storm clouds were gathering over Central Park, and the library's tall windows filtered the gray light into something that matched the mood between them. "Nothing," he said finally. "I want nothing from you except the chance to say that what he did was wrong. The way he spoke to you, the way he gestured toward her uniform. You didn't deserve that." Taylor set down the dust cloth and faced him fully. "In 3 years, you've never said more than good morning to me. Why now?" The question hit its target. Thompson ran a hand through his dark hair, disturbing its perfect styling. "Because this morning, I saw something I should have seen a long time ago. I saw how you stood up to him. I saw your dignity, even when he was trying to strip it away. And I realized." He paused, searching for words that didn't sound patronizing or hollow. "I realized I've been a coward." The confession surprised them both. Taylor had expected deflection, corporate speak, the kind of careful words wealthy people use to distance themselves from uncomfortable truths. Instead, she heard something raw and honest that made her reassess everything she thought she knew about Thompson Mitchell. "You're not responsible for who he is," she said quietly. "But I'm responsible for who I am." Thompson moved to the window, his reflection ghost-like against the darkening sky. "Do you know what I was doing when I heard you two in his study? I was on a conference call about a homeless shelter we're funding in Boston. Talking about dignity and giving people second chances, while my father was destroying yours down the hall." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Taylor joined him at the window, maintaining distance but no longer treating him like a threat. "The shelter in Boston," she said softly. "That's a good thing you're doing." "Is it? Or is it just expensive guilt?" Thompson's reflection met her eyes in the glass. "It's easy to write checks for strangers. It's harder to stand up to your own father." Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the first drops of rain began streaking the windows. The storm that had been building all day was finally arriving, and somehow it felt appropriate, as if the weather was matching the emotional turbulence that had been brewing in this house for years. "My grandmother used to clean houses in Virginia," Taylor said suddenly. "She told me once that respect isn't something you can buy or inherit. It's something you earn through your actions, especially when no one's watching." Thompson turned from the window to look at her directly. "What did she say about forgiveness?" "That it's not about forgetting what happened. It's about choosing not to let it define you." Taylor's voice was steady, but Thompson could see the cost of that steadiness in her eyes. "But forgiveness has to be earned too." The words hung between them like a challenge and an invitation. Outside, the rain began in earnest, drumming against the windows with increasing intensity. They were effectively trapped together now, the east wing cut off from the main house by the storm and the ongoing gala preparations. "I should go help with the setup," Taylor said, but made no move toward the door. "The staff has it handled," Thompson replied, though he knew she already knew that. "Stay. Please. Help me understand how to make this right." And despite every instinct telling her to maintain her boundaries, to remember her place, to protect herself from whatever complications this conversation might bring, Taylor found herself settling into one of the library's leather chairs. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, two people from different worlds began the delicate work of building a bridge across the divide that had always separated them. The library had become their sanctuary over the past 2 days, a space where the weight of the Thompson legacy felt lighter somehow. Taylor sat curled in the window seat overlooking the estate's gardens, her replacement uniform, one Thompson had personally selected and paid for, a stark reminder of how dramatically her world had shifted. The late afternoon sun caught the gold lettering on the leather-bound books surrounding them, creating an almost sacred atmosphere. Thompson paced near the fireplace, his usual composure cracked like a dam under pressure. He'd been building toward something all day, his conversations more halting, his glances more searching. Finally, he stopped and turned to face her. "Taylor, I need to tell you something. About why he is the way he is." His voice carried the weight of secrets too long buried. "It's not an excuse, but you deserve to understand." She set down the book she'd been reading, a collection of Maya Angelou's poetry Thompson had recommended, and gave him her full attention. Something in his tone suggested this wasn't just about Richard's general cruelty. "My father grew up during the civil rights movement," Thompson began, settling into the chair across from her. "But not on the side history remembers fondly. His father, my grandfather, owned textile mills throughout the South. They employed hundreds of black workers, but treated them." He paused, searching for words that could somehow make the ugly truth more palatable. "Badly. Very badly." Taylor felt her stomach tighten, but remained silent. When integration began, when workers started demanding fair wages and basic human dignity, my grandfather fought it viciously. He used every dirty trick in the book: intimidation, false arrests, economic pressure. My father was 18, watching his family's empire built on the backs of people who looked like you slowly crumble under the weight of justice. Thompson moved to the window, his reflection ghost-like against the glass. Instead of learning from it, instead of understanding that change was right and necessary, he internalized the anger. He blamed the workers, not the system. He convinced himself that his family's downfall was personal, that every black person he encountered was somehow responsible for his grandfather's lost fortune. "That's a lot of hate to carry for 60 years, Taylor said quietly, her voice steady despite the pain blooming in her chest. "There's more." Thompson's hands clenched into fists. The mill that finally broke them, the one where the workers organized the successful strike that shut them down, it was in Birmingham, Alabama. The lead organizer was a woman named Dorothy Williams. She was 25, brave as hell, and she gave speeches that inspired hundreds of people to demand better. Taylor's breath caught. Williams. Her grandmother's maiden name. She had a daughter who was about 10 at the time. The family moved north after the strike, trying to escape the retaliation that followed. My father, he's never forgotten that name. Dorothy Williams became the symbol of everything he lost, everything he blamed for his family's downfall. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. Taylor felt the pieces of a puzzle she didn't know she'd been solving suddenly click into place. Her grandmother Dorothy had rarely spoken about the old days, but she remembered fragments, stories about Alabama, about standing up for what was right, about having to leave everything behind. My grandmother was Dorothy Williams, Taylor said, her voice barely above a whisper. Thompson turned from the window, his face confirming what she already knew. I suspected as much. When I heard your full name, Taylor Dorothy Williams, and did some research, the timeline fits. The background fits. You're her granddaughter. That's why he hates me specifically. The realization hit like a physical blow. It's not just racism. It's personal. To him, I represent the ghost of the woman who destroyed his family. Yes. The word fell between them like a stone into still water. And Taylor, there's something else you need to know. Something I discovered just yesterday while going through old family documents. He moved to the desk and withdrew a manila folder, his hands trembling slightly as he opened it. Inside were yellowed newspaper clippings, legal documents, and what looked like private correspondence. After the mill strike, my grandfather didn't just lose his business. He made sure Dorothy Williams paid a price too. He had her blacklisted from every major employer in the South. He used his connections to ensure she couldn't find steady work anywhere. Your grandmother didn't just choose to move north. She was forced to, because my family made sure she couldn't survive in Alabama. Taylor stood abruptly, her hands shaking. You're telling me that your family didn't just benefit from racism, they actively destroyed lives. Including my grandmother's. Yes. Thompson's voice broke on the word. And Taylor, she died young, didn't she? Your grandmother. Taylor nodded, tears threatening. 47. Heart attack. The doctors said it was stress-related. My family killed her, Thompson said, the words heavy with a grief that seemed to encompass generations. Maybe not directly, but the stress of constant struggle, of never being able to build stability because of what we did to her. We killed her. The library, which had felt like sanctuary, now felt like a confessional. Taylor sank back into the window seat, her mind reeling. Everything made sense now, her grandmother's reluctance to talk about Alabama, the way Dorothy's eyes would grow distant when certain songs played on the radio, the fierce protectiveness she'd shown toward Taylor and her mother. She never told us the specifics, Taylor said, her voice thick with emotion. She just said that some battles cost more than others, and that moving north was the price of standing up for what was right. Thompson knelt beside her chair, his eyes bright with unshed tears. She sounds like she was an incredible woman. She was. Taylor looked at him, seeing not the billionaire heir or the privileged son, but a man genuinely grappling with the weight of inherited sin. She raised me after my parents died. Taught me that dignity isn't something anyone can take from you, it's something you choose to keep, no matter what. And that's exactly what you did the other day. When my father tried to strip away your dignity, you held on to it. You stood there with such grace, such strength. You reminded me of everything I'd forgotten about what real courage looks like. The afternoon light was fading, casting longer shadows across the room. In those shadows, Taylor could almost see her grandmother's spirit, the woman who'd stood up to powerful men and paid the price, who'd raised a granddaughter to do the same. What happens now? Taylor asked. Now that we know the truth? Thompson stood and moved to the fireplace, staring into the cold ashes of yesterday's fire. Now we decide what kind of people we want to be. Whether we're going to let the sins of the past define us, or whether we're going to write a different story. He turned back to her, and in his eyes she saw something that took her breath away. Not pity, not guilt, but respect. Deep, genuine respect. I can't undo what my family did to yours, Taylor. But I can make sure it ends with us. I can make sure that your grandmother's granddaughter is treated with the dignity she deserved. The dignity you deserve. Outside, the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere in those stars, Taylor felt her grandmother's presence, and for the first time since the incident in Richard's study, she felt something approaching peace. The buried truths were finally seeing light, and with them, the possibility of healing that neither of them had dared to hope for. The library had become their sanctuary over the past 3 days. What started as Thompson insisting Taylor rest somewhere comfortable while they figured out her next steps had evolved into something neither had expected. Genuine conversation, shared stories, and the tentative building of trust between two people who had lived in the same house but different worlds. Taylor sat curled in the oversized leather armchair, a cup of tea warming her hands, wearing one of Thompson's sister's old sweaters that actually fit her properly. The torn uniform had been carefully folded and placed in a bag, evidence, Thompson had said, though for what, she wasn't sure yet. You know, Thompson said from where he sat across from her, his own coffee growing cold. I always wondered why this room felt so peaceful. I think it's because it was the only place in the house where my father never spent time. Taylor smiled softly. Your mother used to read here. I remember cleaning around her sometimes when I first started. She'd always say excuse me when I needed to dust near her, like I was the one doing her a favor. She would have liked you, Thompson said quietly. Really liked you. She hated how formal everything was, how staff were treated like they weren't people. She was kind, Taylor agreed. The day she passed, I cried in the supply closet for an hour. Mrs. Henderson found me there and just sat with me. Didn't say anything about it being unprofessional. They fell into comfortable silence, something that had become natural between them. Over the past few days, they'd shared stories, his about growing up with impossible expectations, hers about working 3 jobs to put herself through nursing school before the economy crashed and left her few options. I still can't believe you're a registered nurse, Thompson said, shaking his head. All this time, and my father treated you like the help, Taylor finished gently. Because that's what I was. There's no shame in honest work, Thompson. But there's shame in how people can be treated while doing it. Thompson leaned forward, his expression serious. What I can't understand is why you stayed. 3 years of his attitude, his comments. Why didn't you leave? Taylor was quiet for a long moment, turning the teacup in her hands. You really want to know? I do. My little brother Marcus, she began, her voice soft with memory. He was born with a heart condition. The surgeries, the medications, the specialist visits in Boston, our insurance covered maybe 60%. I was drowning in medical debt, and no hospital would hire me full-time because of my credit score. The position here, it paid enough, and it was steady. I could send money home to help with Marcus's care. Thompson felt something twist in his chest. How is he now? He's good. Really good. Graduated high school last month, actually. Got a scholarship to study engineering at MIT. Her face lit up with pride. All those years of treatments worked. He's going to have a normal life. That's incredible, Taylor. You sacrificed so much for him. That's what family does, she said simply. Though I guess not all families work that way. Thompson winced. No, they don't. Mine certainly doesn't. When I was growing up, my father's approval came with a price tag. Good grades meant increased allowance. Bad behavior meant reduced inheritance threats. Everything was transactional. Is that why you never married? Taylor asked gently. I'm sorry, that's too personal. No, it's okay, Thompson interrupted. And yes, partly. Every woman I've dated, I've wondered if she saw me or just saw the trust fund. It's hard to trust anyone's motivations when you're worth more than some small countries. Taylor studied his face. That must be lonely. It is, he admitted. But these past few days, talking with you, I haven't felt lonely. The words hung in the air between them, carrying weight neither was quite ready to acknowledge fully. Taylor felt her heart skip, but pushed the feeling down. This was temporary. This was circumstance. This wasn't real life. Thompson, she began carefully, what happens when this is over? When we figure out what to do about your father? I don't know, he answered honestly. But I know I don't want things to go back to how they were. I don't want to pretend I don't see you in the halls. I don't want to act like we're strangers again. We're from different worlds, Taylor said softly. Maybe. But sitting here, talking with you, sharing stories, it doesn't feel like we're from different worlds. It feels like we're just us. Taylor felt tears prick her eyes. Thompson. I know it's complicated, he said quickly. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this is impossible. But I also know that in 3 days, you've shown me more genuine kindness and conversation than I've had in 3 years. You listen when I talk. You see me, not just what I represent. I do see you, Taylor whispered. But you have to understand, people like me don't get fairy tale endings. We get by, we survive, we take care of the people we love. But we don't get the prince. Thompson reached across the space between their chairs and gently took her hand. What if the prince doesn't want the fairy tale? What if he just wants the real thing? Taylor looked down at their joined hands, his pale and soft from a life of privilege, hers darker and marked by years of honest work. They shouldn't fit together, but somehow they did. This is crazy, she murmured. The best things usually are, Thompson replied. Outside the library, neither of them noticed Mrs. Henderson pausing in the hallway, a small smile on her face as she continued her evening rounds. Some bridges, she thought to herself, were worth building. The morning light that had once brought hope to the Thompson mansion now felt cold and unforgiving as it streamed through the grand windows. 3 days had passed since Thompson's powerful declaration in the study, and the household had settled into an uneasy rhythm, one where dignity had been restored and boundaries redrawn. But peace in the Thompson house had always been fragile, and today it would shatter completely. Taylor was arranging fresh orchids in the main foyer when she heard the familiar click of expensive heels against marble. Margaret Ashworth, Thompson's ex-wife and mother to his 8-year-old daughter Emma, swept into the mansion like a storm cloud in Chanel. Where is he? Margaret's voice cut through the morning quiet, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against her designer handbag. Her eyes, cold as winter steel, fixed on Taylor with undisguised disdain. You. The help. Where's Thompson? Taylor straightened, drawing on the strength she'd found over the past few days. Mr. Thompson is in his office, ma'am. Shall I? I don't need you to do anything except stay out of my way, Margaret snapped, her voice dripping with a kind of entitled cruelty that Richard had perfected. I'm here about Emma's custody arrangement, and I won't have her exposed to whatever changes Thompson thinks he's making around here. The words hit Taylor like a physical blow. Emma, sweet, curious Emma who had started seeking her out for bedtime stories, who had begun to smile when Taylor braided her hair each morning. The little girl who had lost her mother to bitter divorce proceedings and found comfort in Taylor's gentle presence. Thompson appeared at the top of the grand staircase, his face immediately hardening when he saw his ex-wife. Margaret. You're early. And you're making mistakes, Margaret replied, her voice echoing through the foyer. I've been hearing interesting stories, Thompson. About your new policies regarding the help. About how you've been letting them forget their place. Taylor's heart began to race. She could see the trap closing, could feel the walls of the sanctuary Thompson had built around her beginning to crumble. Thompson descended the stairs slowly, his jaw set in a way Taylor had learned to recognize. If you have something to say, Margaret, say it. But leave the staff out of this. Margaret laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. Oh, but they're exactly what this is about. Her eyes found Taylor again, and there was nothing but venom in her gaze. You see, I've done some research on your precious maid here. Very interesting background, Thompson. Very colorful. Taylor's blood turned to ice. No. Not now. Not like this. I have no idea what you're talking about, Thompson said, but Taylor could hear the uncertainty creeping into his voice. Margaret reached into her handbag and withdrew a manila folder, its contents promising destruction. Taylor Williams, formerly Taylor Rodriguez. Arrested in Los Angeles 5 years ago for theft from her employer, the Hendersons of Beverly Hills. Charges dropped when the jewelry mysteriously reappeared, but the scandal was enough to destroy her reputation. The words hung in the air like poison. Taylor felt the ground shifting beneath her feet, felt the sanctuary she'd found crumbling around her. She wanted to speak, to explain, to tell Thompson the truth about those terrible months when she'd been desperate and broke and made one mistake that had haunted her ever since. But her voice was gone, stolen by shame and the weight of her past. Thompson's face had gone pale, his eyes finding Taylor's across the foyer. In them, she saw confusion, disappointment, and worst of all, doubt. The same doubt that had lived in every employer's eyes since Los Angeles, the same suspicion that had followed her from job to job. "That's not," Taylor finally found her voice, but it came out as barely a whisper. "Mr. Thompson, I can explain." "Can you?" Margaret's smile was triumphant and cruel. "Can you explain why you didn't think to mention your criminal background when you applied to work in a house full of priceless artifacts? Can you explain why Thompson's family heirloom watch went missing last month, only to mysteriously reappear after you cleaned his room?" "What?" Thompson's voice was sharp now, confused. "My father's watch? It was never missing." "Because she put it back when she realized I was investigating," Margaret continued relentlessly. "Just like the Hendersons' jewelry. The pattern is clear, Thompson. You've been harboring a thief." Taylor felt her knees nearly buckle. The watch, Thompson's precious family heirloom that she'd found fallen behind his nightstand 3 weeks ago. She'd placed it carefully on his dresser, never thinking to mention such a small thing. But now, twisted through Margaret's poisonous narrative, even her honesty looked like guilt. "Thompson, please," Taylor's voice broke as she spoke. "I found the watch behind your nightstand. I just put it back. I would never." But she could see it in his eyes, the walls going back up, the protection he'd offered her crumbling under the weight of doubt and old wounds. Margaret had chosen her weapon perfectly, striking at the one thing that could destroy the fragile trust they'd built. "I think," Thompson said quietly, his voice cold in a way that shattered Taylor's heart, "you should pack your things." The silence that followed was deafening. Taylor felt tears threatening, felt her dignity, so carefully rebuilt over the past few days, beginning to crack. Around them, the other staff members who had witnessed her triumphant moment in Richard's study now watched her fall, and she could see in their faces the same doubt that now lived in Thompson's eyes. Margaret's laughter filled the silence like acid. "Wise choice, Thompson. Emma will be so relieved to know her father has finally come to his senses." Taylor straightened her shoulders one final time, drawing on reserves of strength she didn't know she still possessed. "I'll be gone within the hour," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the devastation in her heart. "And Mr. Thompson? The truth has a way of surfacing, even when it's buried under lies." She turned and walked away, leaving behind the only place where she'd felt truly valued, where someone had finally seen her worth. Behind her, she could hear Margaret's continued poison, but she didn't look back. Some bridges, once burned, leave only ashes in their wake. The silence in Thompson's penthouse office was deafening. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan pulsed with life below, but inside, time seemed suspended. Thompson sat behind his mahogany desk, staring at the resignation letter Taylor had left behind, her neat handwriting a stark contrast to the chaos her departure had unleashed in his heart. 3 days had passed since she'd walked out of the mansion, her head held high despite everything his father had put her through. 3 days of Richard's smug satisfaction, believing he'd won some twisted victory. 3 days of Thompson wrestling with a choice that would define not just his future, but his soul. His phone buzzed incessantly, board meetings, merger deadlines, a dozen crises demanding his attention. But none of it mattered. Not when Taylor's words echoed in his mind, "I won't let your father's cruelty define my worth anymore." Thompson opened his laptop and began typing, his fingers moving with purpose for the first time in days. But instead of responding to business emails, he found himself researching something else entirely: law firms specializing in workplace discrimination, advocacy groups for domestic workers' rights, organizations fighting for dignity in employment. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. His assistant, Margaret, entered with careful steps, her usual confidence replaced by concern. "Sir, your father is asking for you. He's quite agitated about the staff changes." Thompson closed his laptop slowly, his jaw tightening. What staff changes? He's been trying to hire a new maid, but... Margaret hesitated. Word has gotten out about what happened to Miss Williams. No one wants to work here anymore. A bitter smile crossed Thompson's lips. Even in defeat, Taylor was teaching his family a lesson about consequences. "There's something else," Margaret continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I did some research on Miss Williams, like you asked. Thompson, you need to see this." She handed him a manila folder, her hands trembling slightly. Thompson's heart stopped as he opened it and saw the photograph inside, a younger Taylor, radiant in a cap and gown, standing next to a woman who looked remarkably like her. The caption read, "Columbia University Graduate School of Social Work, Class of 2018. Taylor Williams, recipient of the Outstanding Achievement in Child Advocacy." More photos followed, Taylor at community centers, leading workshops, accepting awards for her volunteer work with underprivileged children. The final document made his breath catch, a medical leave letter from the New York Department of Social Services, dated 3 years ago. She wasn't just any maid, Thompson whispered, the truth hitting him like a physical blow. She was a social worker. "There's more," Margaret said gently. "I found records of her mother's medical bills from Mount Sinai Hospital. Cancer treatment. The timing matches when she started working here." Thompson's hands shook as the pieces fell into place. Taylor hadn't chosen domestic work. She'd sacrificed her career to save her mother's life. Every day she'd endured his father's cruelty, every moment she'd bitten her tongue and swallowed her pride, had been an act of love. His office door burst open without warning. Richard stormed in, his face flushed with anger, still wearing the same expensive suit that couldn't mask the ugliness underneath. "What's this nonsense about you trying to find that girl?" Richard demanded. "Good riddance, I say. Never should have hired her type in the first place." Thompson rose slowly from his chair, the folder still in his hands. For the first time in his life, he looked at his father and saw not power or legacy, but a broken man who had confused cruelty with strength. Her type. Thompson's voice was dangerously quiet. "You mean educated? Compassionate? Stronger than you could ever be?" Richard's eyes narrowed. "Don't be ridiculous. She was help. Nothing more. She was a Columbia-educated social worker who gave up everything to care for her dying mother." Thompson's words cut through the air like daggers. "She had more integrity in her little finger than we've shown in 3 generations of wealth." "You're being emotional." "No, Dad. I'm being human. Something you seem to have forgotten how to be." The silence stretched between them, 35 years of complicated love and resentment hanging in the balance. Thompson thought of all the times he'd chosen silence over courage, family loyalty over moral clarity. All the moments he'd failed to be the man Taylor had seen in him during their quiet conversations in the library. "I'm stepping down as CEO," Thompson said, his voice steady despite the earthquake his words would cause. "Effective immediately." Richard's face went white. "You can't be serious. The board, the shareholders, will survive. They'll have to." Thompson moved to his window, looking out at the city where Taylor was somewhere rebuilding her life without them. I'm liquidating my personal holdings to establish a foundation for domestic workers' rights. And the first case we're taking on is a lawsuit against Thompson Industries for workplace harassment and discrimination. You're destroying everything I built. Thompson turned back to his father, and for a moment, Richard saw something in his son's eyes he'd never seen before: unshakable resolve. No, Dad. I'm finally building something worth having. Something Taylor taught me was possible. His phone rang. Thompson glanced at the caller ID, and his heart nearly stopped. It was a number he'd been calling for 3 days, a number that had gone straight to voicemail every time. Taylor, he answered, his voice barely a whisper. Thompson. Her voice was different now, stronger, clearer, like someone who had finally found her footing. I saw the news about your resignation. About the foundation. Taylor, I need to see you. I need to explain. There's nothing to explain, she interrupted. You made your choice. Finally. Through the phone, he could hear the sounds of children playing, laughter echoing in the background. She was where she belonged, back in her world of helping others, back to being who she truly was. Can I see you? Please. A long pause. Then, softly, Riverside Park. The children's playground near 96th Street. 1 hour. The line went dead, and Thompson stared at his phone as if it held all the answers to questions he was just learning to ask. Behind him, Richard was still ranting about family reputation and financial ruin, but Thompson was no longer listening. He had a choice to make, the most important choice of his life. And for the first time since Taylor had walked out of their mansion, he knew exactly what he had to do. 3 weeks had passed since the incident that shook the Thompson mansion to its foundation, and the morning light streaming through the windows of Thompson's private office felt different, warmer somehow, more hopeful. Taylor sat across from him, no longer in a maid's uniform but in a simple navy dress that spoke of dignity reclaimed. The scholarship fund is officially established, Thompson said, sliding the documents across his mahogany desk. The Taylor Williams Foundation for Educational Excellence will provide full scholarships to 50 underprivileged students annually. The first recipients will be announced next month. Taylor's eyes glistened as she read her daughter's name listed as the foundation's first beneficiary. I still can't believe this is real, she whispered, her voice carrying none of the careful restraint it once held. 3 weeks ago, I thought my world was ending. No, Thompson said firmly, his own voice thick with emotion. 3 weeks ago, mine was beginning. The transformation had been swift but genuine. Within hours of discovering that Taylor was the daughter he'd spent 28 years searching for, given up for adoption when he was just 7 years old and his teenage mother faced impossible choices, Thompson had taken action that sent shockwaves through Manhattan's elite circles. Richard Thompson sat in the corner of the office, a broken man who'd aged years in mere weeks. The DNA test results that confirmed Taylor as his biological granddaughter had shattered every cruel assumption he'd built his worldview upon. His empire remained, but his legacy would forever be marked by the moment he'd raised his hand against his own flesh and blood. I can never undo what I did, Richard said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. But I want to spend whatever time I have left making amends. The trust fund I've established in your name, Taylor, it's not meant to buy forgiveness. It's meant to honor the strength you showed when I showed none. Taylor looked at the man who'd caused her so much pain, and Thompson watched in amazement as she chose grace over grudges. We all have the power to choose who we become, she said simply. Every day is a new chance to be better. The sound of running footsteps echoed through the hallway, and 8-year-old Maya burst through the office doors, her school backpack bouncing as she launched herself into Taylor's arms. The little girl who'd once hidden behind her mother now glowed with confidence, her acceptance letter to Manhattan's most prestigious private academy clutched in her small hands. "Mama, look. They want me to start advanced mathematics." Maya exclaimed, her joy infectious. Thompson knelt to her level, his heart swelling with pride for the granddaughter he was just beginning to know. "That's because you're brilliant, just like your mother." Maya studied him with a serious expression only children could master. "Are you really my grandpa now?" "If you'll have me," Thompson replied, his voice catching. She considered this gravely, then nodded. "Okay, but you have to learn to braid hair if you want to be a good grandpa." The laughter that filled the room was genuine, healing, transformative. Later that evening, as the sun set over Central Park, Taylor stood on the penthouse balcony, no longer as an employee but as family. The city spread below them like a canvas of possibility, and she thought about the journey that had brought her here. Thompson joined her, carrying 2 cups of tea. "Any regrets?" he asked, though he seemed afraid of the answer. Taylor shook her head, a peaceful smile gracing her features. "Regrets are for people who can't see the purpose in their pain. Every moment, even the hardest ones, led me to this. Led me to you. Led me home." In the distance, the lights of Harlem twinkled like stars, and Taylor thought of her adoptive mother who'd raised her with love despite having so little. She thought of the other families struggling to make ends meet, of children whose potential was being overlooked because of their circumstances. "The foundation is just the beginning," she said, determination strengthening her voice. "We're going to change things, aren't we?" Thompson nodded, understanding that his wealth had finally found its true purpose. "We're going to make sure no child ever has to wonder if they're worthy of love and opportunity." From his wheelchair by the window, Richard watched his son and granddaughter plan a future built on justice rather than judgment. The medical episode triggered by the shock of his discoveries had left him frilier, but paradoxically, more human than he'd been in decades. "Taylor," he called softly, and she turned to face him. "Your uniform that day, when I—" He struggled with the words, with the shame that would live with him forever. "I know, Grandpa Richard," she said gently, the title still feeling foreign but hopeful on her tongue. "You were afraid of what you didn't understand. But fear doesn't have to win." As the evening deepened, Maya curled up between her mother and grandfather on the plush sofa, reading aloud from her favorite book about brave princesses and second chances. Thompson listened to his daughter's voice, finally able to call her that, and marveled at how completely his world had changed. The sound of tearing fabric that had echoed through the mansion weeks ago had been replaced by something far more powerful, the sound of a family healing, growing, and choosing love over legacy, dignity over dollars. What does it mean to you when someone chooses forgiveness over revenge? How do you think second chances can transform not just individuals, but entire families? Share your thoughts on the power of redemption below. In the quiet moments before sleep claimed the household that night, Taylor whispered a prayer of gratitude for the path that had led her home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to lift others as she'd been lifted. But tonight, she was exactly where she belonged, surrounded by love, respected for her worth, and free to be wholly, beautifully herself. The Thompson mansion still stood on Manhattan's Upper East Side, its marble halls unchanged. But the hearts within its walls had been transformed forever, proving that sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin with a single act of recognizing someone's humanity. And in that recognition everyone, the billionaire, his father, and the quiet maid who'd always been so much more, found their way back to what mattered most: family, forgiveness, and the unshakable truth that every person deserves to be treated with dignity and love. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you love this story, you will surely enjoy the next one. It's crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.